So thank you, ACPA and organization, Gabriel, and of course Lucy, but she's not here at the moment. Oh, yes, yeah. For all this organization, it's a lot of work, which you probably could guess by seeing what is already exhibited here, and so I'm grateful that I didn't have to do this time. The reason I have two guests here is because they participated and contributed to my research project, which was an opera, La Tragedia di Claudio M, and M means Monteverdi. And from the very beginning it was the idea that new music and early music would merge and work together. I'm very glad that Israel was part of the instrumental ensemble, and so he's my colleague viola da gamba player, and we played a lot together, so that felt as a kind of good nucleus of the ensemble. Certainly because everything is also approached from the viewpoint of the viola da gamba, which is normally an instrument that is not so much in the front. The reason for that will be explained later in my talk. But first I would like to introduce to you these people, because they have many other things, of course. They are much broader than just contributing here to my project. And everything moves on. If we think that the project itself took 10 years, we started in 2014. The performances were in 2018, and since then many things have developed. Luckily it never stood still, there was always movement, and this is what I would like to talk about, specifically because of the subject of that, the unspeakable, or better, the ineffable, in relation to music and words. And it's actually striking that Israel not only produced a very beautiful solo CD with gamba music, which was hidden for a long time, the pieces by Georg Philipp Telemann, which he also connected with video recordings, so when you Google him, you'll find a lot about it. But he has another side, and a very passionate project which concerns the ineffable, and that is music and dementia. The wonders and the curious things that happen when we are confronting people who are suffering from dementia, and through music suddenly reach something that we think can only be reached by words. So it's not that their memory is reconstructed, but there is something happening in the here and now. And maybe, Israel, you can say a little bit more about that, because I was recently talking to you, and I was rather astonished that you said it was not that memories came back or that they were remembering melodies, but actually in the moment something creating, which then made new connections or restored connections.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everybody. Look, what happened with patients with dementia is that it's proven that the memory and their social skills improve listening to music. But what we have found with this new project of music and dementia that was developed in England, Music for Life was it called in there. Here we just call it music and dementia. Is that improvising with people and creating new music with them, together with them, actually has a much more powerful effect. Because when you listen to music, you start remembering things from the past, things that are associated with that music or with an action. I mean, your old love or your childhood or whatever other things. But when you create new music, you gather a little bit of the fragments that the language of music has for you, and then you create a new memory. So what happens next is that they start actually making an improvement in their social life, which is usually very constrained for these elderly people, mostly. And then they start gathering all the memories in one new creation.
Yes. And the funny thing is that there is a big parallel between what we are actually doing, because we go back with these fragments which come from the very remote past, 400 years ago in this case. And we have a lot. We have much more than most people actually know on fragments, and actually also complete things like scores and things. But there is a lot that is also missing, and that is the life which was actually in these artifacts. They were related to people who were alive and who had a lot of knowledge, which simply died with them. You cannot take everything. You cannot freeze anything into some relic that will help that life in the future to live again. So, and in that case, I think where there is a strong relation between the realm of our possibilities of our brain, which sometimes come with inexplicable things. So how can this music from 400 years still touch us? There are a few notes, and or we just imagine that it's music from 400 years ago, or there is really something in it. You as a composer, Cristiano, and a dramaturgist, you are a lot involved in putting things alive on stage, to make things alive, which need more than just performing the score or singing the lines of the vocal parts. Is there anything specifically in this project which you could point to in relation to what we just have been talking about?
I think that, well, hello everyone. Hi. Good evening everyone. I think that in both situations, both as a composer and a dramaturgist, it does relate, because as a dramaturgist, you also have to fill up some gaps that you find in the libretto, in the action, or especially in my case, I'm very much focused in the relation between the music and the action. So what is the music talking? And is this something palpable or concrete, or is it something ineffable that you can feel and give other layers of understanding to the plot of an opera? And you can do that with some operas are much more complex, some libretti are much more complex, some libretti are much more direct. You have the tenor, you have the soprano, you have the baritone, they fight.
Simple story, you mean?
Exactly. So what other layers you can add to that? So I think that this would relate very much. And as a composer, of course, you have an image in your mind. You have a sound image that you need to translate so that musicians can perform it. Mm-hmm. So how does this dialogue between you and the instrumentalist and with the score in between happens in time? And how does this, for instance, now we are talking about a project that was performed 6 years ago.
Yes.
So a word before the pandemic, for instance. I was just finishing my studies at the Conservatorium. It was developed a lot during my time in the Conservatorium. So a lot of things happened since then. And which composer am I now looking back at that composer back in those days, you know? So I think that those relations can be made with what you guys have been talking.
Yes, okay. Thank you for this short introduction. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at this opera and how it came into being and what are the main ingredients. Therefore, I have collected some material to show you. I will not go too deep in all sorts of details because it's a very large work. There were many collaborators. There has been many discussions. We're not going to repeat anything of that, but rather keep looking at it from the viewpoint of the theme of today. So. Okay, it's very dark here now, probably so you can read what is on the screen. This is just a statement which is more generally related to ACPA, in my opinion, and we're always struggling to find definitions for what is the research and what is the meaning of research. So maybe you can give it a thought. But what is for me very important is to work with something very practical. And there had been a discussion to find a sequel to a large project which happened here in the Handel year in The Hague, where the composition department of the Royal Conservatoire was involved, together with the early music department. And it was on an anthem by Handel, This is the Day, and a serenata. And for this project, students of Cornelis de Bond, the composition teacher in those days and recently retired, they participated as active colleagues of Handel and competitors. So they wrote pieces of music which were an alternative for passages which were written by Handel. And we felt that it was necessary to start a like project to keep the fascinating things that were possible by the merging of two departments which normally are very apart, early music and new music. And so the idea came to do something with Monteverdi, which was my proposal, and which was welcomed by the composers. But I was also studying and researching a lot with the ideas of Michael Polanyi, who is from origin an Hungarian chemist, but he more and more became interested in the philosophy of science and epistemology. So what he wrote really rang a bell in my own experiences. I sort of recognized myself in what he was describing, and I was determined to go and apply this in my research. Polanyi goes from for the general listener, he goes from the intuitive side of our brain and thinking, our mind. And one of the principal things is that you start from a hunch. So you have a kind of preview internally, and it can be just a feeling. And that most of the time is an ignition point for your work. Another very remarkable comparison he found, or to be precise about his work, his ideas, is that we have a tendency to rationalize a lot in coming to ideas that should open up new ways in science. But he said many times, in a way, you work half intuitively, or maybe even completely intuitively. For artists, this is quite normal and familiar. But he wanted definitely to get it more into a kind of theory and explanation. And he came with the comparison of a blind person who is feeling his way, literally, he's feeling his way into the world. And there is something happening between the tip of his stick and his body. So there's a way coming and going of what he feels, and what he calls is that the part that you hold the stick that is close to your body, and he used an anatomical expression for that, which is proximal, so the proximity. And on the other hand, there is a thing that is farther away, that is the distal. And for any researcher, this must sound familiar, that there are things which are familiar to you, and you're used to these ideas, and there is something far away, but how can you make this connection? Here's a small explanation of his theory. So he split the knowledge or knowing, as he says, because he thinks knowledge is not a static thing, but it's a process. So he says there is a part of knowing which is happening somewhere under the surface. You cannot put your finger on it, what's happening there. And there is the explicit knowledge, which you can describe in words, in signs, in formulas, etc., etc. And that is what we usually call cognition. So he gives here these two axes. One of is awareness and the other is activity. And he sees this whole process happening where tacit knowledge is sort of articulated by things that you notice without noticing, without awareness. So it's some sort of in the corner of your eyes, and it's basically always bodily. In the direction of of explicit knowledge, it's conceptual. So it's a result of thinking, and there is always this focal element. So you focus on something. This is simply a basic structure which I used for my method as a researcher. So I thought, okay, the proximal is the here and now. Where am I now? I'm a viola da gamba player. The instrument is there. But I go, the other side of the line is 400 years back, a little bit more than that. And that is the time when Claudio Monteverdi was writing his second opera, Arianna. The process described as what is happening when you are researching and when you're collecting ideas and when you're considering things or trying things, etc. Polanyi calls indwelling. And this is a very important part of his theory, because you are not working with interrupting and then going on. There is actually a sort of constant process. It's constantly working. And I think that I ring a bell if I say that everybody who is doing research recognizes this process. You are not stepping out of it and then say, okay, coming back. Maybe you put it aside for a time, but you're not really out of it. So I decided to approach the whole thing in a narrative inquiry, which is here in a project with a composition department that participated with 7 composition students, under the guidance of Cornelis de Bond. After 4 years, we lost a few of those composers who were not engaged enough to say to stay with us. We had a project with 5 vocal soloists, 1 actor, 6 commedia dell'arte actors, and 10 instrumentalists. I think I can show you who it were. Okay. No, not here. Sorry, here it is. Is it big enough? Is it readable? I think it's not very much info. But anyway, here are the composers. You see Cristiano Melli, who is here present. There is a stage director, and then here we have the roles. Monteverdi, then an Italian singer who sang Verità, or Virginia Andreini and Euridice. Raffaele Giordani, Rosalind Stürze, João Paixão, and Francisca Duckel. What is remarkable here is that the singers are representing often several roles. This was a habit in Monteverdi's time, and I thought it appropriate to use this principle also in contact with Cristiano, who at a certain moment we found out that we should go back to the historical approach, where actually the character of one of the opera characters were sort of summarized in the archetypes. Yes. So the archetypes in the no, it's not archetypes. Allegories, yes. So allegories, which were a perfect solution for this problem of the amount of different people. We had at a certain moment, I had in my libretto 16 people that should come on stage, and suddenly we discovered that it could be actually done with much less. And the funny thing is that more or less at the same time as I was considering this, Magnus Tessing Schneider published his article about L'incoronazione di Poppeo, where a similar thing is happening. So it was useful in Monteverdi's time. Now the story, why exactly this year? Monteverdi wrote his Orfeo up to February 1607, because at the end of February it was performed for the first time in Mantua, where he was a court composer. Not much later, he had to defend himself to allegations by a theorist who published in 1600 an attack, which I'll discuss later. And then in September, his wife died. He didn't have much time, and he was called back to his job, and they asked him to write a new opera. So actually there were only 10 days or 12 days in between the dying of his wife. So there he started Arianna, to compose Arianna. But this was blocked. The performance of it was blocked because the occasion where it was written for was a wedding, which was postponed. So suddenly another competitor came up with an alternative opera for the carnival of that time. Now we're halfway that year, that tragic year of Monteverdi. Then his intended star singer for the Arianna, a girl of 17 years old, who was living 3 years in his house, so he had trained her into a singer which he thought would be ideal, got the smallpox and she died. They had to find a replacement for this girl. And there's a description of an audition of an actress who was a perfect solution for this problem. So she was already in the court because she was part of a Commedia dell'arte group, actually the prima donna. She had experience with singing, and so she did a perfect audition, and that was the actual discovery, because suddenly theater and music merged into one person, which finally led to a complete new approach of the stile recitativo, in the sense that really acting and singing came together. For the writing of this libretto, I was depending on text, of course, and the texts are delivered mainly, if it's personal, by letters. Happily, 127 letters of Monteverdi survived, and also some letters which he is responding to or which are responding to him. So this is an example here from my libretto, is taken from a letter, La perdita di tanta rara donna e dotata di tanta virtù. This is when his wife just died. So I could take literally the text from some of the letters and put them on stage. A very important role also for my research, which is about the opposition between the theoretical thinking and the practitioner's way of doing, is this book which was published in 1600 by Giovanni Maria Artusi in Bologna. He was a clergyman, so he was actually from the church, and you feel in everything that the church had a conviction that they had power and that they were right. And if we remember that Giordano Bruno, a great activist, philosopher, etc., and an innovator, was burned in Rome at the same time by the Inquisition, because he was saying things or writing things that didn't please the church that much. You can feel in everything that comes in Artusi's text that he feels convinced he can say all this as part of those who have the truth in their suitcases, so to speak. I give you a small example because this is to show that Artusi used a fragment of Monteverdi's music, and he says, it would please me much more, mi piacerebbe, se io vedessi che questi passaggi, if I would see that these passages fossero fondati sopra qualcuna ragione, if they were founded on some reason that could please, che acquitare potesse lo intelletto, that could please the intellect. But for castles in the air, castelli in aria, chimere fondata sopra l'arena, so these are kind of chimeras founded on sand, they don't please me that much. Actually, they are words for to be it's like almost like blasphemy. What a newness! They don't deserve any praise. Now, this is just one fragment, but there are loads of these, and the book is rather thick. So it was a nice source of information for me to have a discussion which took place 400 years ago, and which is about the fundamentals of art and innovation in art, and put this on stage. I decided to use the image of the labyrinth, which is part of the palace where Monteverdi was working, and so what you see here is the ceiling of the Sala del Labirinto, and the text, I don't think you can see it very well, but it says forse che sì, forse che no, forse che sì, so maybe yes, maybe no, maybe yes, maybe no. This is a nice text you can take on the road in the labyrinth. So give you a small example, what that meant, I can show you this.
E come dire un passo ragionare in modo cominciare in un, poi cambiare a un secondo e poi alla fine siamo tutti perduti. Come? Che tanto siano di se stessi innamorati che le pare di poter corrompere, guastare, rovinare quel buon regole.
So, this is the Artusi as we imagined him, like a schoolmaster, sort of attacking the artist, which has not the vocabulary to defend himself. So this schoolmaster is very sure of himself. So as an allegory, this is the personaggio of ragione, the ratio. And he will come back in different disguises later in the opera. Now, I make a little jump here because this is what actually happened in the new opera. There's a lot of text, and this text was half sung, half spoken, and which we tried to approach in our new opera. So it should be mixed with the original recitativi, as they called, so the spoken sung text, and the new sung music. And this is called the parlar cantando. So actually it's, sometimes they also say cantar parlando, but that's a different thing, because cantando is actually the basis. Even though you are speaking, you are still singing. We don't have initially not much information about how this was done, because this is the score of those days. There is a bass line, there is here a vocal line on the top with the text. The position of the text is very often also not very clear. And from there on, we have to reconstruct what is actually happening in this music. Of course, we have now more than 150 years to experience with musicology, so people are specialized in deciphering and reconstructing this music. But we should not forget that this is the basis where we start from. For us, the goal was to put it into a play, an opera as a play, which is, a theater play. And the idea was that we should also play with this music. So this is what you just heard, è come sentire un pazzo ragionare. How do you put this in a new way in a score? There has been a lot of discussion about that with the composers. And this is one of the solutions. The idea behind it is that maybe our brain is also a labyrinth. And the similarities kept popping up. But for Monteverdi, as he wrote in one of his letters, the labyrinth, and actually he was quoting Plato, who was quoting Socrates, said the labyrinth is nothing else than quarreling or fighting. And this is how we used it, and this is, of course, the mythological end of the labyrinth, which is this Minotauro figure. And in my, and not only my interpretation, in many interpretations, the Minotaurus stands for our instinct, which is in everybody. So the darker sides of the human being, and the fight had to be delivered with this monster. And here we have the musical translation of the effect of the Minotaur. Maybe I can go back to the opera. So what we have here is actors who are not trained musicians, and they were asked to perform a percussion score. And then at a certain moment, the hero is appearing. And the Minotaur is killed. This mask is made in the 16th, 17th century tradition of Italian commedia dell'arte mask making, and it plays a special role in this performance. But it's also illustrating how we were trying to keep things very close together, which is the tradition of commedia actors. In this modern setting. This is another example of a new score. I better show you the music probably. The opera was performed on the 15th of June, it premiered here in The Hague in the Regentes. And as you know, 6 years later, this was then ending into my dissertation, including all considerations around the making of the opera, specifically about illustrating the context of all the layers. What I want to point out now is that here, this is actually obituary of Claudio Monteverdi after he just died. It was all in the honor of this composer. And in the specific description about his last days, it said that he was still working on a book that was explaining his new way of composition. And so we're talking about 1643, and he was actually still looking to answer the attacks of Artusi by demonstrating that his way of writing and making new music also had a very thorough fundament, and that he was not just doing something. Another thing that is striking in this obituary is that he is pointed out that he was the Orfeo of the viola bastarda, or the viola, actually they say just viola. And this viola bastarda was a viola da gamba instrument which was specifically used for improvisations at the end of the 16th century, at the beginning of the 17th century. It's had a very short peak. But after doing this whole project, my conviction has grown that this instrument kept a special place in the life of this musician composer. And that it's a little bit of a blind corner for musicology, that they were so impressed by him, by his operas and by his vocal output, everything that survived, that the ephemeral side of his work, which was playing this actually improviser's instrument, that is sort of forgotten. It's I think it was important that this instrument is sort of covering a little bit the title page, so it's put into the front somehow. And I think we want to demonstrate you now with a bit of music what could be behind it. We're going to perform a piece which is actually written for two tenors, at least published for two tenors. And as you see, there is a ostinato bass. So it's going on and on and on. And this was a way of improvising which started to be very fashionable in the mid-16th century and lasted for a long time. Actually, it was for centuries was it a way for musicians to let their improvisational skills and fantasies go. And this is what I think we can find back in this vocal piece, which has a very instrumental flavor for my taste, and which fits in a perfect way the compass of the viola da gamba or the viola bastarda. So we would like to demonstrate this now in a live performance. And I'm very glad that Nuno Miranda was available and willing to join us in this performance today, because without this bass, the whole thing becomes a little bit meaningless. Yeah, so the music is about the wind, Zeffiro torna, so come back, Zeffiro puts the waves of the river in movement, and then at a certain moment, it's going through the mountains, and there are caves which echo the sound of this that the wind creates. And all this is depicted in this music, in this piece, where the echo is really written in. And it's a very instrumental approach, so you can of course sing that, but if you do it on the younger, it's really resonating like an extra space. So there are many of these kind of small paintings in here, which work by themselves here, so even if you don't explain them. Yes. So what you just heard here, well, I think most of it spoke for itself. Of course, if you imagine a real opera improvisation, there would be more, maybe more ornamentation here and there. We left that out just to make clear that already the whole structure of the piece is very convincing, at least to my taste, for this in this kind of instrumental world. And though it was published much later, like 1632, it is clear that the instrument that gave access to court music, because Monteverdi was accepted in court as a viola bastarda player, and that he mentioned this in his third book of madrigals to his patron, and said, yeah, these nobilissimo esercizio, so the noblest exercise or practice of the viola gave me access or opened the port for me to your music, to your court music. That was 1592. In 1607, we just saw it as the date of Orfeo. He still is mentioned as a viola bastarda player by his brother, who wrote the defense for him when he published a new book. And in that book, there's a whole explanation by the brother of Claudio Monteverdi. He didn't use his own words, so he preferred to remain silent and indignant, not to mingle too much in this kind of battle, which you just saw symbolized in the labyrinth scene of the opera. Now there is this girl who was living in the house of Monteverdi, and her name is Caterina Martinelli, and she got, as an allegory, she got the image of pleasure or piacere. And the whole act, the second act, is sort of around her. Because of lack of time, we will not go into much in detail, but she was asked to sing in this Daphne opera. What we made her the main character, La Ninfa Daphne, who is chased by Apollo, and then because she fears him so much, she is changed into a laurel tree, which is also the story, one of the Metamorphosis stories. The whole scene was first delivered in pantomime by the actors. This is Apollo chasing the dragon. There is no music written for this, but I asked the double bass player, who is also a very good jazz player, to just improvise a kind of bass underneath. Yeah. Anyway, so there was first a pantomime, and then the real story of Daphne, which means that Amor is shooting Apollo and he falls in love with this nymph, and she is transformed into a laurel tree. Now, to give this moment a bit more magic, while the girl is dressing to become a tree, we had to improvise a little bit with some plucking in the chords that were preluding the next scene. So this is the tenor again, with his ability to sing beautiful aria. You hear here the quick passages. They're different from the instrumental idea that we just demonstrated. They're really very ornamental. As a kind of dramatic break, I let the vanity as he is, as all tenors, maybe all tenors are. So he's, when he's Orfeo, he's vanity, but when he's Apollo, he's more vanity. And then a carnival scene breaks into his aria, which leaves finally the three lonely there, and she's feeling very sick and ill, which was historical, because 2 weeks after Carnival, Caterina Martinelli, she got the smallpox, which is a lethal disease in those times, like the pest. And so she is on stage, but the whole scene is making it a bit more dramatic by contrasting it with the comics, who are having a whole scene for themselves. So this is classical commedia dell'arte, built into this dramatic scene. And maybe, okay. Maybe I can invite now Cristiano to more react on what I'm going to talk about now, because that's the following scene. I don't know if do you have a microphone? Yes. So what I wanted to show now is a larger. I think we don't have so much time to go into many details, so I think it's to demonstrate the issue of tonight is by going what happens here next, is that she appears to be very sick, which is then on stage, of course, and then gradually this comic side of the committee, of the Commedia dell'arte group, is turning into a more grim and serious matter. And therefore I would like to show you this on a longer fragment of the opera, which I have prepared here. So these two comics, they bring the girl to her house, and I have to find the right moment here. So.
Mi sento male.
Sta male, do caresse e do baci.
Bravo.
So sorry.
Secondo me l'ha tirato da bambino, perché queste famiglie contadine con queste bestie chissà che fanno. Oddio. Un altro! Che bello! Gianni, mi piscio lungo, io ce l'ho lungo. Piscio lungo, piscio lungo, piscio lungo, piscio lungo, piscio lungo.
Oh! Delle pere!
Sei un pero!
Ma no, delle pere!
Sei un pero!
Ma no, le tette!
E te?
Sì, guarda!
Oh, che bello! Insomma tu.
Non lo so, tastemo.
Tasto io.
No, io.
Io. Insieme. 1, 2, 3.
Well, it's clear that she's sick. And then the doctor is called, and he comes with a diagnosis.
Morbido, che parte dalla quinta cervicale, arriva alla sesta lombare e alla quarta orizzontale, che fluisce sul polmone destro e sul fegato sinistro e ha gravi ripercussioni frontali.
Esattamente che penso anch'io.
Ma non pensare e riponi la mente piatto! Forza!
Subito! Via! Avanti!
Sono presto!
Quanto peso?
Sono stupido, speriamo bene!
Posa le mani!
Fermi!
Sì!
Inghiotti con manco fastidio! Signori e signore, questa donna è molto aggravata di male.
So, Cristiano, can you explain what is happening here in terms of the composition, the music?
Yes, yeah, you can hear me, right? So what you just heard now is part of the fate layer. So from the beginning, as composers, we decided to have what we called the Monteverdi layer and the fate layer. The Monteverdi layer was, in our first idea when we started the project, was supposed to be played continuously when Monteverdi would be on stage. And the fate layer would be, and both layers, they come from Monteverdi's music. So the Monteverdi layer comes from the Lamento d'Ariana. And the fate layer, if I'm not mistaken, comes from the Darala Notte, which is a madrigal that is sang after the scene, after she dies. Which is a madrigal that Monteverdi wrote for her death, to mourn her death, if I remember well. So we composed this, we decided to have these two layers that would intervene during the action. And in the end, what happened, you can see their F layer. So that's the fate layer. Because what happens is that fate has a big importance in this plot, in the plot of this opera, because it's because of fate that Monteverdi opera is not performed in the marriage. Fate also happens when his wife dies and then Catarina dies, but then it's also fate who brings Virginia into his life, and it's because of Virginia that he writes the Lamento d'Ariana. If I remember well the story, because this was from 6 years ago, the Lamento, Virginia was famous for a Lamento that she was doing with her Commedia group. And therefore, the Lamento d'Ariana is supposedly written specifically for her abilities on singing. And the idea, then in the research that the composition group was doing, the idea was to try to see what we could do with this parlare cantando. So what would that mean? Then we divided the singers. You had some allegories that would be closer to speaking, some allegories that would be closer to full singing, and allegories in the middle. And of course,
we just heard that with Rajon.
Yes, yes.
So he was more talking.
And in his score, you can see that you have a mix of the Sprechgesang, but also with some trill signs. So he should switch between the two of them. Because of course the climax, the musical climax should be the Lamento d'Ariana. That's when everything in the plot and the whole musical material would come together, of course. So then how would we drive the composition, the vocal composition towards that? So these are the aspects that we were taking in consideration.
But it should be clear that this Monteverdi layer, as you call it, works as a kind of formal in the Stockhausen way, that it's coming back all the time.
It was supposed to work more like a formel, composition, but in the end we didn't use it completely.
No.
It was supposed to be the whole time that, but then we are talking about the beginning of the project when we were still 7 composers, maybe even more. So the one thing that is important is that Cornelis had this class. So Cornelis was teaching composition at the Conservatorium, but he also had a class called the Theory of Beauty, so the beauty class.
Before we go into the details, before we go into those details, maybe we first go back to a very practical thing, is that this tremolo, which is used there, it's almost like a trick, but it comes back anytime that death is announced somehow.
Yeah, it's looming.
Yeah,
in
it's
the
looming
background.
towards. Yeah, and it works. I think quite well if we look at.
It's one thing that you can see. You can see that. Can you go back in the score, Johannes?
The score.
The score, please.
Yeah.
You can see there that you have the second trombone, for instance. You can see you have a text beneath it. Sometimes in the strings here, when they start, they also have text. So the thing that another thing that we decided was to use text as a basis for the rhythm that the instrument would play. So we indicated this in the score
as rhythmical shaping. I remember.
Yeah, it's also Liszt also uses that in the Dante Sinfonia, I think. So this we decided to use this as material as well. We also have, sometimes you have clusters of notes even in the trombones, for instance, because the idea would be that the musicians could also improvise on the material that we are giving. So since the practice of basso continuo goes around improvising on a set of data that the musicians already know, we decided to give this set of data to the musicians so they could improvise on top of it, which led to a lot of rehearsals.
Yeah, yeah. Not everything was workable, because that's also what you encounter. Is some things they need otherwise that you are weeks and weeks together and become a kind of different kind of ensemble. So we had to go back to more formal. And use of the score.
Fate also struck our opera, right? Because the first singer that we are going to have couldn't come for the performance. Many things happened with the compositional group that entered. The stage direction also was changed. So many things happened during the process until one moment that we had to compose the opera. We had like weeks, months to finish the opera and make it work.
Okay, let's go back to the scene we were just arriving in, because I would like to point out some more things here. That is the role of the mask. We had this group of actors who was of course the example of embodiment in art, and so they were very versatile, and they were very often they were on stage as a kind of living stage set. So they were accentuating emotions that happened in on the front of the scene, and they were dressing it up somehow. So they start, for instance, as ghosts, as spirits, and here, of course, they are representing the people. Who are shocked that this young girl, which is the star of the city, is dying. And what I would like to point at is this expression, which is created by the fact that they wear the masks. Jankévelić, who wrote the book La musique et l'ineffable, which I consulted a little bit for this evening, speaks of the mask as a frozen grimace, a frozen face, so to speak. So it's not alive. It's referring to life, but it's in itself not alive. And this is something that is used in music as well, of course. And as you will see, if we proceed in this scene, So the doctor is turning into a sort of serious character here. Arlecchino is still making fun of him.
Dire una cosa così.
Bravo!
È molto probabile che c'è le parole! Il vaiolo!
So if you see how the mask accentuate the expression here, and on the one hand they have a comical working, and on the other hand it's felt that it's tragic. But how do you feel it? It's of course that girl is laying there. So this character is the Duchess, I should say, Eleonora de' Medici. She was the wife of Gonzaga, the Duke of Mantova, the boss of Monteverdi, but she was very much involved in the creation of the opera Arianna because it was for the wedding of her son. And there is a whole lot of correspondence about this moment where also she has partaken personally in writing her feelings down. And it was a very welcome thing for me as a librettist to simply put it literally in the opera. So what I say here, what she says here, from this moment on, is all text written by Eleonora de' Medici, and I just imagined a kind of expression, and together with Cristiano, who created the role together with the singer musically, also allowing her some space in improvisation. I think she does more improvisation than the other people has done on the other singers.
Potere.
Yeah, so she's power,
Yeah.
potere, which is accentuated by her volume, of course. But questa donna è la cantatrice per Arianna, la ragione per la malattia d'aver voluto bere, la meschina bere tutto questo carnevale vini grandi. And vini grandi that were very heavy wines, which normally were not drunk as such, and certainly not by a young girl. This is some assumption that the Duchess has introduced in her letters. There was no reason for it, but that she wanted to sort of keep the idea away that this girl was going to die. Even more, that she was going to inseminate or affect other people, like the son who was going to marry. So let's go back.
Ma in uno stato pericolosissimo! Non è sicura di campare!
Disordinamente, senza acquarmi. Una gran furia del male sopravvenuto. Oh, con tanta paura di questo benedetto male, non l'avendo principe che mi trema il cuore.
So, che mi trema il cuore.
If I may say something, the case of Potere was a very interesting one because the other singers, they weren't from the Netherlands, but she lived here, so we could work. I could work with her for a long time during the process of composition. So that was a very special situation. And you can see on how Hairline is written and how she performs it, that a lot comes from this process of making the text come alive from her voice. So it's the feedback between singer and composer was very big in this case. So very good memory.
Yes, yeah.
Can keep also some time for the Q&A and discussion.
Yeah. I'll go a bit further here, because this takes quite some time for her to die. But what I wanted to show you is this particular moment here.
Perché tu resti con noi.
And this is a quote from the libretto of Arianna, which she is not going to sing. So here, by taking off the masks, they unveil their faces, and so they contrast to be alive. Suddenly, the grimace is taken away. This is really a moment of senza parole. Now, to complete this, this is followed by a madrigal which is written for the death of Caterina Martinelli, which Monteverdi wrote for her, commanded by his patron. And one of those madrigals was, it's our 6 madrigals, and this one was perfectly suitable. And there is a very strong merge of the new music and the original madrigal. What you hear is the Monteverdi layer. I think I'll leave it here, because if you want to see it, it's all online. The opera is to be found on Vimeo. You can find it through my research catalog publication of the dissertation as well. I understand there are maybe raising questions now more than there should be. So let's go on with.
Well, I think it's interesting. Thank you for all the presentation, but because you opened up a lot of things, and
yeah.
Well, it's a proposal of the evening that we can also open up to what are the ideas or the questions or anything that's happening through all of us present together. So I wanted to open it up to a Q&A if somebody has a question or something to bring up. or maybe I start with a bit of an invitation, because I would be curious to a little bit go back to the beginning of your presentation with your, I mean, everything that you opened up very interesting at the beginning about the process of research and about this relation between these intuitions and what is proximate and what is distant. And because we've gone a bit far away from there, I'd be curious if you can start to wrap back to develop also, on the one hand, your whole project of what did you learn in a way, and what happened on that process from the composition of the opera. How does it relate to these intuitions that you had about Monteverdi, about what had not been written, had not been assumed as part of history? So maybe as a starting point.
Well, let's start with this text of Eleonora de Medici. So that's a letter. I find this in a letter. I find the letter in an article about the death of, or the life and death of Caterina Martinelli. So this is all musicological work, and you find it, you read it, and it's distant because it's about something that happened a long time ago. I don't feel much when reading this, maybe in an intellectual way, because I collect information. But once you make a real person of this Eleonora de Medici, apart from the paintings that we have from her. But she's on stage, on Flesh and Blood, and she has a voice, and with that voice she sort of represents the historical Eleonora de Medici by using these words in a context. Suddenly something happens, and the same goes for Monteverdi. At the beginning of the opera, he's quoting a lot of his own letters, getting enraged, very angry. He did that in his letter. I was astonished that he dared to write this to his patron, like, you owe me 5 months of salary, look at me sitting here, etc., etc., and then you could have at least done this and that. That's when the moment you put it on stage, something happens, and that goes for everything, of course, that is staged. But the project is that this is staged in a context. So everything has a context and is sort of pointing to each other and to the other elements. And this is happening in a musical way because we use music from Monteverdi, and on the other hand, we add things from now. So if you look at this stick, the new music is of course at the proximal side, and the early music is at the other side. But the early music changes by us hitting that music with our music. And there is something that you cannot really explain what is really happening, because I see it with a lot of reconstructions or adaptations of Monteverdi opera throughout the 20th century. His music is used a lot. And even if it's not performed, it's also arranged a lot into something that is more entertaining or that has a different character. So we are constantly in this process of hitting the past through something. What we did is hitting this through a huge project, because inviting these actors and working with us, so they're trained in a classical or even earlier Venetian tradition, where the mask is sacred. So the way they were treating their masks, and they put them in the cases and so on, and you shouldn't just put it on your face and la la la, that's forbidden. So, and I think to play a scene like this, where the impact is so big, is only possible if you add a kind of extra dimension of belief. And belief is a very essential element in Polanyi's approach as well. So what we learned is by doing this and experiencing it, then you start understanding on two levels. An intellectual level, where you can say, oh yes, this happens there, oh, it's nice, it fits nice together. But the other level is the unspeakable, the ineffable level, which in every performance that has an element of magic in it, is present, I would say. And the good music almost always invites this to happen. And music of less caliber ask more effort for that. So then sometimes the performer has to put something extra in there. So these are all things, I'm just pointing to a few things, but there was many, many things happening. And of course there was a lot of fighting among the composers. But in a way, it was about the same thing. Only they didn't know. They thought that they were doing anarchy of most of the time. And yeah, no, it was a kind of a culture of anarchy. And of course, sometimes you have to break through barriers. And that's also what Polanyi says. You dwell in, that means you immerse yourself in this process of making something, of working together, and sometimes at a certain moment you break out of it. And those are the moments that something happens and something new comes out. And this happened also several times while making the opera. For instance, Truth, as is the character, as the allegory, I already put that label on the singer who was going to sing, Ariana. But then I found this theater piece which was written for her where she is representing truth. So I got a sort of confirmation. Okay, Momo è verità, and she's verità. She's playing this. So, and then I found a text in that play which fitted perfectly in my opera. So at a certain moment, things just fall on its place. And what do you learn? Yeah, is that this is the way it goes, and don't do it again. Because maybe you don't have 10 years anymore. No, but it's a lot of work, and so circumstances and making things possible this way.
Maybe there are some questions.
Something struck me as, the viola bastarda.
Yes.
And then there was an explanation that it was only a short-lived musical instrument in a certain period. But then it came back in the text that it was a way to connect to the chord. I didn't get that.
Yes. That was my order of telling the story was wrong. So I should have told that maybe at the beginning. So he was accepted in court in 1592.
Yeah.
So that's 16th century. That was a time that the bastarda was played considerably, but it is a very difficult instrument to play because you had to be very knowledgeable about composition and polyphony. So to know what you could do in your improvisations to fit into a musical structure. So there were only very few virtuosi able to play this. And there was this court in Ferrara, which had a fantastic player, Alfonso della Viola. And so the other court, Mantova, which was the boss of Monteverdi, also wanted that. So that's why he was invited.
And that's how he got in?
That's how he got in.
Okay.
And they think, yeah, so okay, he wanted to be famous. He didn't have any interest in being an instrumental famous musician, because that was actually a very low level. You had to be master, choir master, chapel master. That was the estimation. So he didn't stress ever that he was also an instrumentalist. He just did that just because he could. But his boss wanted him to play weekly a concert, even in 1607.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what you see here is a Stradivari model viola da gamba, which is very strange because that was the time when the gamba in Italy was already out of view somehow. But they're still extant instruments, so it's a copy of that. It's teaching us a lot, the way it's constructing and sounding, etc., etc. So these are first steps in an exploration of what was the bastarda viola actually like. And Stradivari had the malls to make instruments inherited from Amati, which was 100 years earlier. So then suddenly it fits with the time of Monteverdi. This is further research which has to be done, but mainly in a practical way, by also playing and trying and listening.
But that was part of what you were doing already?
No, this is where it came out. I thought, why do we know this, and why is no one doing anything with it? Because there are no notes written down. And that was below his level, his statue, and I think he didn't need to. And we see this happening a lot in music history, that the good improvisers didn't write down. They just played it on
the reason why we know about viola bastarda is because there are a few treatises, but as you say, we don't know anything specifically about Monteverdi's practice, but we do know that he was a very knowledgeable composer because the way he composes is based on tradition but creating something new, which is actually what they were trying to replicate in the composition, trying to create a new language that will refer to the past but be established in the present. Sort of what, and this is why Johannes was speaking about the dementia at the beginning. This is more or less what we were trying to do, improvising together with people with dementia. We try to create a new language for them so that they can create new memories. And so as the whole project, it is like that. The whole project was like that. We created a new, through all these things of fate and fight and things, we created a new language that that went on in each one of us in a very different way. And he became a stage manager and a composer of another kind of music. So as I was more focused on other aspects of my career as well. And I can tell you that most of the musicians that participated there had a big impact on it.
Yeah, in that sense, it's a collaborative work. So it's not that one person decides. Or the only thing I was very firm to is I built this libretto on historical facts. So these are testimonies. That's why I refer in my dissertation to verbatim theater. I don't know if you have read about it, but verbatim theater once came, a few years ago, came back to the attention because there was a play about FBI interrogation of a so-called American dissident from the army who leaked information, and so she leaked essential information about the email attack by the Russians, which influenced the elections in 2016 for Donald Trump. So I suppose everybody remembers that. But this whole FBI interrogation is just taped and filmed. So what she did, the playwright, is literally taking these texts and put it on stage again. And I thought, hey, parallel to what I've been doing with texts from 400 years ago, she is doing this, and there are many similarities. And the effect it brings is, that you make something alive by giving it a voice on stage.
Any other question? If not,